Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about nutrition. As we age, our nutrition needs change, and today we're speaking with a registered dietitian who specializes in midlife women. Let's get started. Listeners, today we are talking about nutrition in midlife, and we have a guest. We have a guest that is going to give us advice and information. It's such a confusing world out there. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing as midlife women, and she is here to set the record straight. Julie, you brought this guest to us, so I'm going to let you introduce her.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have her here. This is Marietta, and she's a friend that I've known for several years from church. She's a registered dietitian with a board specialty in sports medicine. In fact, the first in Nashville. She's worked with some of the top athletes in the world, including the Titans, Nashville Ballet, and numerous Olympians. And she's currently the team dietitian for the Nashville Predators, which is our pro hockey team. Now, if you're wondering what she can offer a bunch of midlife women who are not top athletes, have no fear. She also works with individuals through a company called Nourish.
Welcome to Midlife Matters, and we're so happy to have you. And I hope maybe at the end we can ask you a little bit about what are some of the things that you do for professional athletes, because I'd like to know what the difference is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. My sons might actually listen to this podcast as their first one to listen to that. The funny thing about that, Mindy, is that when I work with youth athletes, including our hockey players, I often tell them, I'm probably not going to tell you anything different than your mom's told you, but it's going to sound different coming from me.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what we need, Marietta. Yeah. We're so glad you're here.
When you're on social media, you just are inundated with all these nutrition and health trends. How do we know who to listen to? And where do we go to get good information?
That's a really complex question. In this day and age, it's probably not popular for me to say some of the government websites like the NIH, or National Institute of Health, but they are the most reliable source for information. In fact, they fund a majority of the research that's being done on nutrition or anything else in the health field. And so it is where you do get your most evidence-based and up-to-date information. So places like nutrition.gov would be good, or any of the NIH, the fact sheets is what they call them. So if you want to look up anything, intermittent fasting or whatever, fiber maxing, any of the diet trends, those are probably the best places to look.
I know recently on a podcast, I mentioned that I had started taking collagen, and I had been afraid to do that in the past because I just didn't know if it was safe and if it really did what they said it did. And so I had a discussion in Life Group with Marietta, and she said, yes, it does. There's finally medical studies to back it up that show it does do what we want it to do. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I love a healthy amount of skepticism, especially when it comes to supplement use. And you rightly, with your background, Julie, probably have good reason to be a little suspect about some of the things you might be putting in your body. So as far as collagen goes, or first let me address any supplement. We want to use food first as an approach, but sometimes supplements can be necessary to fill in gaps. And, there are gaps that occur, especially in midlife. In our nutrition. And so we do have to learn to fill those. And sometimes it can't be through diet. It needs to be through supplements. Collagen is probably a great example of one of those gaps. So collagen is really helpful, especially for females in midlife. We do have increased protein needs. So collagen is a very bioavailable protein, a protein that you can absorb and easily use. But then it also has benefits for some of our obvious midlife concerns like wrinkling, and also for things that aren't maybe as obvious like our bone health. It also can support your joints. And one thing that a lot of women aren't aware of is we have a twofold risk for arthritis. And our risk for all sorts of diseases and nutrient gaps really go up when we're 50, so right at midlife. And the reason for this is really hormone changes, is what we're finding, and that's really new research because it wasn't being done until the past couple decades. But collagen's a great example of something that we can say, hey, women in midlife benefit from this, not just to look good, which is the motivation for a lot of people. In fact, I find health is usually a poor motivator. Beauty is much better, um, unfortunately. But for health reasons, can really step in and fill a gap and really make a difference in your long term health, which is key. You are at midlife, but we know women live longer, but we also are sicker. So our quality of life can really be improved if we address some of these nutrient gaps that kind of surface during midlife.
Are those gaps something that are across the board, or is this something that is individual? And how can we kind of know, if I think if I could afford maybe to go find and see a functional medicine doctor, I feel like that's a great place, to have individual health and looking at my numbers and hormones and things like that. But for the person that's not there, what can we do across the board as we age and realize there are some gaps?
You bring up some great things. First of all, across the board, there are gaps that occur male and female, but there are additional specific gaps that are female related. So, the answer to your question is yes, there's gaps that all of us, as we age and hit midlife, your nutrition needs really change at age 50. And so, what happens then is you have a decreased ability for absorbing B12. So, all of our B12 needs go up. All of our needs, whether you're male or female, our needs for protein go up about 20%. Our needs for B6 go up, our needs for calcium, vitamin D. There's actually quite a few things across the board that our needs go up for that are important. As females, some of our additional needs, as you mentioned, hormone changes, are really based on the fact that we're having hormone changes. And usually for most women, that starts occurring in early 40s and can continue through mid 50s is pretty normal. And it's no longer recommended that you really go test hormones to test for this. It's really just based on symptoms and the fact that you are that age. As my doctor likes to say, with puberty, you kind of don't bring a 12 or 13-year-old and say, I think they're in puberty. It's like, yeah, they are. They're that age. So as females, we kind of say that too. We're, if we're in that age range of kind of 42 to 65, you're there. You're going through hormone changes. And so just specific to that, one of the biggest things nutrition wise that can help decrease our vulnerability to different diseases and things that are going to impact our long-term life is like vitamin D. So women have a fourfold increased risk for autoimmune disease. And our biggest risk for onset is either post-pregnancy or perimenopause and menopause. And so one of the things we can do specific to women is really focus on our vitamin D levels. And vitamin D is not really found in food unless it's been added. We mostly get vitamin D from sunshine, but as we get older, we don't absorb and activate vitamin D from the sun like we did when we were younger. And so it does become really necessary for us to supplement vitamin D. And also going back to the beauty motivation, nor do we want to get out and expose our skin to the sun for 30 minutes, mostly full body a day. I mean, I know at this age, there's many parts of my body that I am not interested in seeing the sun or anyone else for that matter. So therefore, vitamin D, just a little supplementing vitamin D.
Okay, I want to back up and ask two things before I forget. I see the value in hormone replacement therapy for, bone health, cardiac health, and all that. But does hormone replacement therapy offset those nutritional changes or not? Or gaps, I guess.
So, hormone replacement therapy is not going to offset the nutrition gaps. It does help. Although that's a complex question, specifically when we're talking about calcium. So, as we as females have a drop in our estrogen levels, we do not make new bone, and so our risk for weak bones goes up tremendously. And that really, really, really impacts quality of life. So, if we supply HRT, if that's a choice you make and you visit your doctor and you decide it's right, for you, it can actually mitigate risk of many diseases by 50%, which is significant. So it can be really helpful, but it doesn't mean that the nutrition gaps are addressed. You still need extra calcium. You still need extra vitamin D. So they really, I would say, go hand in hand.
Also, I've been reading about vitamin D, and I recently just changed to vitamin D plus K2. Is that a new thing? How come we didn't always know that? And is that true? Is that important?
So the K2 recommendation is not new. I would say that's at least a decade out. And that's something that actually is not hardcore, evidence based. It's more like we suspect you should take K2 with vitamin D3. And the reason why is when you take K2 with vitamin D3, it actually, they think, prevents soft tissue calcification. So
Mhm.
why is that? Why do we care about that? Well, we just said that as females, our risk, especially in midlife, for coronary artery disease goes way up. In fact, 1 in 3 women will die of heart disease. It's still the biggest killer out there, and as females, our risk dramatically goes up in midlife. So part of heart disease and what gets us is we get plaque buildup on our arteries. And so when you increase vitamin D, you do absorb more calcium. We like that. That's the goal. But sometimes that increased calcium can be deposited in the artery walls, and that causes plaque buildup. So K2 kind of helps prevent that. And that's why it's recommended. So yes, if you
Okay.
get D3 with K2, that's the way to go.
When you're talking about supplements, I've always just taken a multivitamin, and on the back of the multivitamin, it always says 100% of all of these things. Like, do you have to take an individual supplement for each one of these, or can a multivitamin do anything for you?
First of all, I'd say you were lucky if you found a multivitamin that only provided 100%. That's the outrageous thing is so many of those multivitamins, you look at the back and it's like 12,000% of your B6, and when you look at the research as far as multivitamins go, they are not really improved with associated with any improved health outcomes. In fact, when you look at the data, it's weak for supporting that they actually do any good at all.
Okay.
However, as we said, with the nutrient gaps that start to exist in midlife around age 50, a multivitamin does kind of provide what we need for those gaps. So it's small amounts, under 100%, the gaps that occur for nutrients like zinc, like B6, like B12. So a multivitamin can actually provide that. So I would say that's actually a wise thing to do, even if you didn't take a multivitamin before. In midlife, it probably can be a safety net or a safeguard. Again, food first, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what we're saying is, as we get older, food can't always address all the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Because of absorption, right?
Absorption, yes, and increased need.
If you were just going for your normal physical every year and you get the normal blood work that they say you're allowed to get every year, are they going to catch any like glaring gaps? Because I never get anything from my doctor saying, well, you're deficient in this or that. Like, how are we going to know?
Yeah, they are not at all going to
Okay.
catch any of that. And I think all of us know in this day and age we have to be our own advocate for our health. And again, doctors probably hate, like you said, when you listen to the media and you hear all these things and you rush into their office and you're like, test my blood for everything. The only doctor that loves that is the functional medicine doctor. And they'll say, great, I have 365, biomarkers I would like to draw from your blood.
Mhm.
So there are certain things that can be helpful to have, but also you may not need a blood level. You just need to know you need more.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I heard you mention that we have 20% increased protein needs. I've always been a little skeptical of like the raging protein. I'm skeptical of like a protein Cheerio. Like, how much protein are we really absorbing? I just feel like they've put protein on literally everything. And how much can your body even really absorb in a day? I've heard before that it can only absorb so much. The rest is just waste. So like, how crazy do we need to be getting?
Yeah, that's a really complex answer. And so I'm going to try to make it simple. These are the things that, especially with athletes, we pick apart all day long about protein, because athletes like love megadoses of protein. And I'm usually trying to get them to eat less and eat more carbohydrates, which is not a friendly message. But females usually don't meet their protein needs. That's actually the truth. Most of us do need 25 to 30 grams per meal. That's the truth. And if you're focusing on getting it per meal, which is a little easier way, I think, to look at your protein, you're going to find that there are a lot of benefits. One is increased absorption and utilization. So your body doesn't necessarily handle a large amount of protein at one time. So you can't wait till dinner and say, I'm going to have this piece of steak and there's my protein for the day. Doesn't work well. So we really do need to spread our protein more evenly throughout the day in order to be able to utilize the protein more effectively. So how much can you use? What's interesting is that bar seems to keep moving.
I know.
Right? Previous amounts or limits on protein and what's recommended were really based on your body's ability to get rid of the nitrogen. So every gram of protein you eat has nitrogen. Nitrogen is toxic to your body, and your body must get rid of it. And the way that it gets rid of it is in your urine. And so in the past, we really said the amount of protein you need is limited by your body's ability to package that nitrogen up and get rid of it in urine. So in other words, your body's ability to make urine and get rid of it. That's what it was based on. Okay. So for most people, that's to put it in kilograms, which is the way we talk in nutrition world, is 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, 2 grams of protein for each kilogram of body weight. So that was kind of considered the max. But we know that people that have increased needs, which can be for many reasons, maybe they have cancer, maybe a disease, any disease state, they may be able to have much, much higher protein intake, and they need it. So again, that's a difficult question to answer because we've seen people have enormous amounts of protein, their body handle it just fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And taking in large volumes of protein doesn't necessarily hurt your kidneys, but it can.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it happen, for sure. So for most of us, though, yes, we need, for females our age in midlife, 25 to 30 grams per meal is a safe amount. Does that mean we need 150 grams per day? No, most of us do not.
I just feel skeptical of so many things. They just have like the added protein powder. Like they must have shook some powder over those Cheerios, or like you'll see like a protein water. Like, I don't know. I'm skeptical. Are we really absorbing that kind of protein the way we would like a meat protein?
It's funny because one of my favorite things with athletes on this topic is a study that it's an old study, but they took athletes after they did an exhaustive event and gave them recovery meals. And so they have a control group, and then they have group A that got engineered recovery shake, that had all the right proteins and carbohydrates and nutrients they need for recovery, right? It was a sports recovery drink. Then they took your group C, right? And they took them to McDonald's, and they gave them food from McDonald's that had the same carbohydrates, proteins, the same nutrients that engineered recovery shake had that is supposed to help them recover. Which group of the three do you think recovered the best?
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
Because it's real food. I mean, it's real in quotes.
Right?
In quotes, but you're not drinking it.
That's right. You never thought you'd say that, especially on air. McDonald's is real food, but you just did. So,
and they were
kind
happier
of
too.
Yeah, they were, right? Yeah, so, to your point, whatever McDonald's puts in their food, it's closer to real than the
Wow.
engineered recovery drink. So, hands down, that's a funny, bit of research, but we see that time and time again. Our body handles and processes real food so much better than any supplement, and the more that you adulterate a product, generally you're losing something that it did for you. A great example of this is the recent Harvard study that you may have seen in the media that was saying full fat ice cream that's just the heavy cream, is it decreases your risk of heart disease and diabetes and it's better for you, and everyone read that going, what, how am I supposed to know what to make of this? And I had so many questions about it from people, and it was a complicated answer, but the bottom line was, because basically the less you alter a whole food, the more benefits you get. More benefits that sometimes we're not even aware of till 10 years later when research catches up. So, yes, our nutrition is best from whole foods, hands down. Again, supplements can help, but yes, too many Americans reach for supplements instead of food to meet their needs. This goes back to right now, like the seed oil stuff, that you hear, and people are like, "Avoid the seed oils, they're, from the devil," and it's like, "Wait, what? Why?" Like that, this is not a new message. We've been saying from the beginning, we need to limit processed foods. That is not a new message, and that's where a majority of people's quote unquote seed oils come in. We've said for decades, use olive oil. That's not that's not new message, right? But
Mhm.
all of a sudden, people are checking their label of their protein Doritos to see if that's seed oils, like that is literally, oh, they do. Protein
I
Doritos makes
believe
protein
it.
Doritos,
Yeah.
and right on the front it says no seed oils. And it's like, really?
I
Ooh,
mean,
that sounds like a good nutritional food.
Well, I think that's
Right?
the problem is, like, I always cook with avocado oil or olive oil,
Mhm.
but then when I go grab the chips from the pantry, they're full of seed oil, so I start to notice that, so I have bought into the whole seed oil is the devil.
I do wanna
It's hard to find things that don't have them, though, it's very limited.
Siete chips or Boulder chips, Julie.
Yeah,
There you go.
I bought
Okay.
Boulder chips, yeah.
like, if I'm eating chips, I'm just chalking it up to eating chips.
right, right. There's no healthy
Chips are not
chips.
health food. I'm just eating chips. I do wanna ask you, Marietta, is it just me, or are food intolerances on the rise? And has that
Mm.
actually changed in our diet? Have we somehow messed up what our bodies are naturally supposed to do by all of these processed foods that we've gravitated towards? Because yes, I used to eat McDonald's as a child all the time and I felt fine. And then I started eating healthy and I can't eat anything now. I mean, like, I feel like I eat a piece of cheese toast and I hurt. And have I messed up my gut? My like, how can I eat and not fall into, like, avoiding every kind of food out there? Have I developed new allergies? Has this changed? Have I messed it up? Can I fix it? Am I just a mess? I mean, I just need help.
Well, yes and yes to a couple of things you said, which is, when is it kind of our fault and some of the changes that have occurred in our food? Absolutely, it is. But number two, part of it is age. So one of the things, again, in midlife in particular, when we see a drop in estrogen, in estrogen does so many things, and I think we're not educated as females about all the things it does. But one of those things is it has a lot to do with your immune system. So it affects your T cells, which are one of the cells that really have a lot to do with immune function. And higher levels help keep your immune system happy and calm. And so when we see a drop, we have a really big increase. And I mentioned the fourfold increase for autoimmune disease, but this also applies to food sensitivity. So anything that you put in your body has to recognize as friend or foe, right? So your immune system's going, oh, I know that apple. It's cool. It's great. Or I reckon cheese is great. But then it sometimes it can at any point in your life go, you know what? That cheese is an enemy. Let's tack. So that can happen And again, part of this can be age related. I hate to say, yes, you had no problem. And you know what's funny, to go back to my hockey players, because I told you they're just like us. I find and I work with them from the time we draft them, which is age 17 or 18, and then hopefully all the way through to when they finish their careers, which sometimes is 40. So we work with them at all different points. And so I find when they're young and we draft them, they're like, I'm eating the McDonald's, and I don't have a problem with it, and I can eat it and go out and skate and feel great. And it's not until about age, they get a little older, in other words, that they're like, "Oh, that doesn't feel good." And I'm like, "Yeah." So we do have these amazing systems of kids that we can just eat junk and not have a problem with it. And all of a sudden, as we get older, our bodies go, "Oh, that doesn't feel good." And so I like to tell people that as we hit midlife, that these are not new messages from our body. It's just they're screaming a little louder, like alcohol, like maybe you could drink it when you were young and not a problem, but now you have one drink and as if, you're like, oh, my sleep, it was terrible and I can't handle that. So again, that's not a new message, but it's screaming at you now that you're in midlife.
Well, I haven't heard about this thing that you guys have mentioned several times. What was it, like fiber maxing? Is that what is that? And is that the
new
latest
protein
trend?
It is the new protein.
The new protein trend.
Now
You're
we're going to
exactly
have
right,
fiber
Julie.
Doritos.
Oh, absolutely, we are. Yeah. Yes, fiber maxing, and so fiber is kind of as Julie said, replacing the protein trend. And this is why if you haven't been to the store lately, and there's like 4 beverage aisles, and yes, at least 1/3 of them is protein drinks, as you mentioned, including protein waters. But now we have like a whole aisle of fiber drinks, right? And so you have all these sodas with fiber, and so we can drink them because they have fiber, and that's the big hot thing we need. Now, in midlife, that is something that our needs do increase for is fiber. We need more fiber. But we hopefully will get it from eating Brussels sprouts and cabbage and not from having Olipop or Popwell. When I talk with people about their health concerns or their weight loss concerns, which is a health concern, or you name it, that I always tell people we want to make it sound like I'm really addressing your needs for blood pressure or for autoimmune disease or whatever. But the reality is the diet's all the same. So if we just would eat more fruits and vegetables, it kind of would solve a lot of these concerns and problems. 50% of all of our meals should be fruits and vegetables.
That's easy at dinner. It's hard. I don't know. That's harder for me during the day, to cook something. Or I don't know. I guess I eat berries and raw fruit for
I was
breakfast.
Gonna say at breakfast it's pretty easy to get a lot of fruit. I mean, I don't usually have a vegetable at breakfast, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between soluble and insoluble fiber? And I
this
don't know.
is a sure sign of midlife when you're asking about soluble versus insoluble fiber. Nobody under 40 asked me that question.
I'm curious as to why you're asking this question, Julie.
This is late night reading for me. This is
Julie.
This
Yes,
is new
I can.
information.
Okay, I'm the oldest. It's obvious.
Words I have never spoken.
Both types of fiber are important. So, soluble fiber is going to help pull water into the intestines, which is helpful. And insoluble fiber provides bulk that helps push things through. And really, you want both. And in particular, also some of the insoluble fibers are what we'd call prebiotic fibers. And so getting those kind of rough things that your body may not completely break down can still be beneficial. So I know people sometimes see like corn, and they eat it and they see it later and they're like, that didn't do anything. It's an insoluble fiber and it did.
Okay.
It still provides benefits. They just provide different benefits, but both are really important. And that's why they both naturally exist in foods. And I think part of our danger with nutrition is to go back to fiber maxing or protein is when we start to elevate um, a particular need or nutrient or something above everything else. And so that again goes back to the whole food approach. So soluble and insoluble fiber, both are really important. And that is why they naturally both exist in foods. Like if you look at broccoli, the top of the broccoli crown, the little, part that's leafy-ish, it's the soluble part. The stem of the broccoli is the insoluble part. They go together. That's the way God made them, and that's the way our body needs them. We need both. If you have an imbalance between the two, you can have issues. And if you have a bowel disorder, you may have more issues with one of those types of fibers and have to be careful with the amount you get. So in general, like if you have a bowel disorder, like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, then you might really struggle with the soluble fibers. And that's because your body's not breaking them down and they cause a lot of inflammation and pain. So we might limit those in those population. But for those of us that have a gut that's healthy, we need to work it. We need to challenge it and we need to get those foods that have both types of fiber.
Interesting. So an example would be, is this an example? So I always cut the skin off my apple, but actually, I should eat.
Oh, you're
whole?
in trouble, Marie.
Yikes!
Yikes.
God put the skin on the apple for a reason.
That's what I was thinking you're probably going to say. But, you read online all these scary things about the skin is basically going to poison me. So I cut it off.
Just like water, right, Marie?
Yes, water's poisoning me. Apples are
Right.
poisoning me.
Well, this right now they're currently explosive diarrhea used to be plaguing our country because of our
Yes.
fruits and vegetables. And I can't tell you how many people are like, I'm not eating my fruits and vegetables right now. And I'm like, that is not the answer. I just got done saying it cures everything, So
Right.
what I've been really emphasizing to them is, can you get more of your fruits and vegetables from your local farms? Right. So I get a crop share every week and I'm eating whatever they grew on the farm. So I'm eating what's in season, and I'm not overthinking it and I'm getting whatever's there. I'm going to make it. I'm going to eat it, and same goes for my fruits and it's an organic farm. So I can trust that, should be able to trust that. But apple skins, I mean, all of us have preferences, right? Just like my daughter who doesn't want the crust on her bread. I mean, that's fine. You can cut it off, but you just got to make up for the nutrients elsewhere. And you are missing out on a powerhouse. A lot of the benefits from the apple are actually in the skin. Same with the potato. A lot of the benefits are from the skin. So skins are really important and do provide really the powerhouse of nutrients.
Yeah, well, because I do buy organic apples, but they've scared you so bad on all the, even I think, well, this is just garbage. This skin, it's probably gotten sprayed by something. I should get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, yes, you can get scared if you listen to too much media, for sure. There's so much scare tactic out there. In fact, that's what they want to do, right? So many fad diets or trends are based on using scare tactics.
That leads me to my next question. I think there's a lot of confusion about carbohydrates, and you've mentioned carbohydrates, and I'd like to just say to you, I've had a health journey myself. I learned the hard way that cutting out carbohydrates is really bad for me by the effects that I was noticing after about a year and a half, and I had to put them back into my diet. And so, how much do we need? What are good sources of carbohydrates? And tell us, especially for midlife women, the value of them, I guess.
So after the age of 35, the number one complaint that doctors get is low energy. No surprise, right? So carbohydrate intake is directly linked to that. Our bodies are, in fact, our brains only work off glucose, and that comes from carbohydrates. And so your brain actually needs a minimum amount of 120 grams a day of carbohydrate in order to have peak functioning, to avoid your brain fog, to have your brain be sharp and ready. So Even just knowing that fact alone should tell you that carbohydrates are really important in our diet. That is the way our brain is designed and made. And you can have as many professionals or doctors or carnivore diets or, weigh in on the pros and the cons of that. But I go back to the way God made our brains.
Mhm.
It's that easy. That's not a new fact. We've known it forever. And so I do try to make sure people are getting their minimum amount of carbohydrates. Now, after their minimum amount, the amount that they need is really going to vary based on their activity level and health needs. With carbohydrates, the big trend on you need lots of protein and no carbohydrates is based on the fact that people are eating a lot of processed foods. So
Right.
again, it's not a new message. Let's limit our processed foods. They shouldn't have put out there limit carbohydrates. It really is limit processed foods. If I have said, before half of our meal should be fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. In fact, a serving of fruit provides the same amount of carbohydrate as a serving of rice or a serving of pasta or a serving of beans. They're all the same
Mm.
as far as
Mhm.
carbohydrate goes,
Mhm.
but they do provide different nutrients. Now, vegetables provide less carbohydrate compared to fruit, but if your emphasis is your meal is largely plant-based or fruits and vegetables, you can probably meet your minimum carbohydrate needs pretty easily. But if you're trying to get your fiber, you may find that getting some whole grains in is really helpful. And if you're very active and at midlife, we all know we better be active and lifting our weights and moving, then you have increased needs for carbohydrates. So those needs again are going to vary by individual, and they can vary anywhere from 40% of their diet to 60% of their diet, but it's still a majority of their diet. But I think when people think carbohydrates, they're thinking bread, right?
Right.
And they should be thinking like apple,
Mhm.
and other whole foods like that.
I was thinking that was good news for my homemade sourdough bread, though.
Yeah. Oh, I do like bread. I am a fan. And good for you, homemade sourdough.
Marietta, I would love to ask just your thoughts surrounding intermittent fasting or fasting with a healthy diet. What would you say about that at midlife?
So with intermittent fasting, I'm or any quote unquote diet plan, I'm always going to ask someone's motivation for following it. Most commonly people's motivation is weight management, and it is a quote unquote diet plan that has been proven fairly effective for people trying to lose weight. And that's because it's not restrictive. And that's also a positive. In other words, it doesn't say you can't eat any foods. It just says you got to eat them during certain hours. And so all diets, no matter if you're following, Atkins diet or the Sacred Heart diet or any of these others that come up, they all work the same way if you lose weight. They're not different. They only work if you eat less calories than your body needs. So some people will latch on to time restricted eating or intermittent fasting, or they'll latch on to you name the diet. And if they find it easy to stick with and cut calories and not feeling deprived, then it's successful, right?
Mhm.
Now, the benefits again of the intermittent fasting is they're not limiting any foods, and that's positive. That's one of the downfalls of most diet plans is they start cutting out, foods. However, it does not offer superior benefits unless you're diabetic. So people want to attribute all of these things to intermittent fasting, but they're not there, these extra benefits, except for if you have bowel disorders or you have diabetes, there are some benefits. If you have bowel disorders, it does allow more time for your bowel to rest. And so that can promote healing. If you have diabetes, it can promote lower glucose or better improved glucose control. And it's because you're having more time that you're not taking in new sugars. And so that's a benefit. The biggest mistake that people make with intermittent fasting is most of the time their fasting window kind of hits lunch to dinner, right?
Mhm.
In kind of an early lunch, early dinner window. And that is not supported by the research. If you're going to do time restricted eating or intermittent fasting, ideally, you should your window should start early and it should end early. And that's because our bodies are most insulin sensitive in the morning.
Your
And
eating window is what you're talking about.
That's exactly right. So with intermittent fasting, you have a small eating window and it's like 4 to 6 hours, depending on your preference. And so your 4 to 6 hours of eating ideally should start, if you're doing it in the morning, and end, whatever, mid-afternoon or day right there. But that's not how most people do it. And it's because of social reasons, et cetera. But if you want the added health benefits, it's actually best done that way.
So that's why you read a lot not to skip breakfast, is because you're going to process that sugar better in the morning.
That is one reason why. Also because food in meal times is a big part of our circadian rhythm. So this is important, especially in midlife, as we all struggle to get a good night's sleep and have energy. One of the things that we really work with people on is realizing it's not just having regular sleep-wake times, it's having regular meal times. And so when you get up and eat, and it doesn't mean you need to eat right away. You eat whenever you want to. Hopefully it's when you're hungry. But sticking within an hour of that regular meal time is important for your circadian rhythm. That is important for optimizing your energy levels. So, if people were going to eat a smaller meal or skip a meal like they might with intermittent fasting, it is better to do at the end of the day because they need energy for the day. And so you're going to have more energy if you're eating earlier in the day versus eating later.
Let's talk a little bit about the sports world, because that's such a unique focus that you have. And I'm sure there are people that have questions about that. Mindy, what kinds of things would your husband and boys be interested in knowing?
Well, I will say a common thread amongst my boys who have basically they're all athletes, and whatever they're doing, they're all athletes. And so creatine has been one of the biggest things that they have asked to take. And my boys started asking pretty early. And my husband and I looked up, when they were allowed to, I guess by the FDA, really. And it's, I'm like, you're not taking it before you're 18 because that's the only research we can seem to find. But creatine has been a big question amongst my younger boys. Magnesium and potassium are now being questioned as my boys start to age, and also with my husband who's in midlife. So I'd love your thoughts around those things.
That Mindy, that was perfect question because it is absolutely appropriate to us as females in midlife. Would we benefit from creatine and magnesium? Yes. Would we benefit from more potassium from our diet? Yes. So I love that you asked about this. So we'll hit on again. I like I said, our athletes are no different than us, and like you said, I call us all athletes as well if we're exercising regularly.
That's right.
So creatine naturally exists in our body. Our liver makes it, and that's because it is necessary. We really have 3 energy systems in our body, and the first one operates off creatine. That's how we produce energy. The second one is off carbohydrates, producing energy from carbohydrates, and the third one is off of fat. And so the first 3 seconds of any movement, so let's just say you get up and jog to the door because the doorbell rang. Well, the first 3 seconds of that is going to be fueled by creatine. So your body knows that it instantly needs energy to do this activity. And that's what it's fueled from. We get creatine in our diet from meat, but again, if you're not getting enough, your body will make what it needs from your existing amino acids reserves in your body. So how does it help if you take or supplement extra creatine? In order to get the benefits from creatine, you do have to supplement. So you can't eat enough to get what we would call ergogenic benefits that are above and beyond what a normal healthy diet would provide. So those benefits that creatine does provide is it can help increase muscle growth. It can help preserve muscle. And this is where we get into midlife for us as females, is we need to help preserve life. And there actually is tremendous research about creatine. I mean, over 50 years worth. It's been around. It's nothing new. And it's heavily, heavily, heavily researched. We have existing research in adolescents. We have existing research in the geriatric population. So it's been heavily studied at all age ranges, and it is considered safe and effective. Does that mean I'd say your boys should go out and have it? No. I always say with youth, you have to question, why are they trying to do this anyway? And it's because they want to get bigger,
That's right.
and that's a whole nother, concern or issue to deal with, right? Um, but I also think that because creatine has been seen for that main purpose, a lot of females until recently have been hesitant to take it. And even some of my athletes are like, "I don't wanna take creatine, I'm not trying to get bigger." And I'm like, "It doesn't just make you bigger, but it can help you add muscle or put on strength," which is really important. And really in us as we get older, it's helping preserve our muscle, and that's really important. So, especially if I have somebody that's injured, or post-surgery, I'm giving them creatine.
Mm,
Absolutely, I am. Now, it's important to know that if you are, taking creatine, supplementing it, you need extra water along with it. So
okay.
that is really important. So magnesium is involved in, you know, hundreds of reactions that are occurring in your body, and for many reasons, whether it's immune function or energy production. Magnesium's critical. So magnesium is one of our electrolytes. You do lose it in your sweat. And so athletes do have a higher need for magnesium because they're, again, losing it in every drop of sweat. So I think right now the current media really promotes magnesium for sleep, and it is helpful for that.
Mhm.
But if you don't get enough magnesium, especially as an athlete losing in sweat, you can have muscle cramps. You can have muscles that aren't recovering as well. So it would is pretty normal for athletes to need extra magnesium. What is our major source of magnesium in our diet? Leafy greens and nuts. So, if you look at your
Yeah.
kids and think, do they need extra magnesium? Well, how's their leafy green and nut intake? Or your husband, right?
Mhm.
Chances are they might need a supplement. That's a hard one to try to eat more of
Mhm.
to make the difference. So, magnesium is important for all of us. It can have a lot of benefits, and it can be difficult to get enough in your diet, especially if you're sweating with your workout every day. So, it is one I would consider supplementing. Potassium is one we do not recommend you supplement. Um, your body is really good if you have healthy kidneys. Your body's going to regulate your potassium levels, and that's to protect your heart. If you had too much potassium, it can be fatal. But again, your body is made to regulate things, and it does a great job of doing it as long as it stays healthy. Over 70% of Americans get inadequate potassium. And that's because they don't eat their fruits and vegetables, which is our main source of potassium. Potassium is super important. It's the second biggest electrolyte you lose in your sweat. So in your sweat, you lose the most sodium, then potassium, then magnesium as far as electrolytes go. So you lose quite a bit of potassium in sweat. And so with my young athletes in particular that don't eat many fruits and vegetables, they're running into cramping or feeling washed out, and it's directly linked to their need to eat more fruits and vegetables. And even some of my professional hockey players, they're kids, so they also have that problem. And it's one of the major things I work with them on. So sometimes we'll come in instead of a supplement, we'll give them like body armor, or Prime is another hydration drink, or coconut water. But Prime and Body Armor are coconut water based. And so those are natural ways they can get increased potassium. So that's a better way to add it in. So I do have my athletes drink one of those to get their potassium, especially if they're not big with their fruit and vegetables.
Mm.
And potassium particularly is important because it counteracts sodium. So as females, this is your extra tip you didn't ask for. But if we go out to eat and we have a lot of sodium in our diet and we're feeling squishy, and bloated, from all that sodium, well, your secret to combat that is to down some potassium. So potassium directly counteracts sodium, and it can help get rid of that bloat fast. So that's your extra
I
tip.
love it. Yes, that's what we need.
So I see some people like adding those electrolyte packets to their water when they're exercising. So I assume that must have magnesium and different things in it. Do our bodies absorb that well?
You might as well put that trend up there with fiber maxing and protein,
Okay. we don't really absorb it.
No, we do, but electrolytes are, like, super hot right now. Everybody's like, "Oh, I woke up, I better add electrolytes to my water," and I'm like,
Right.
"Slow down there," you know? So, the big issue, and I'm gonna call names out here, okay? So, liquid IV, that's super popular, and people are like, "Oh, I'm hydrating so much better now that I'm adding these electrolytes," and I'm like, "Are you?" Because they're not, right? So I do say hydration is not just fluid, it's fluid and electrolytes. That is an important message I give my athletes. However, if you want to, stay better hydrated, you need to drink more fluid. Now, electrolytes are necessary for helping move the water that you drink into your muscles. So that is actually key. It does occur by osmosis, and therefore it is important. And sodium is actually central for that to occur. But when people are adding all these electrolyte packets, they're often adding sodium chloride. There's many reasons for that. Sodium chloride is table salt and it's cheap, very cheap. And so these fancy, expensive electrolyte packets are selling you on some expensive salt. And I'm hoping it's not a new message to anyone listening that we should be limiting sodium in our diet. Excess sodium does raise your risk of heart disease, which again we said is the major cause of death worldwide. And so sodium chloride is not something that we necessarily need to be adding to our diet. Most of us get plenty in everything that we eat. So I do like, if you're going to add electrolyte packets, I like ones like Ultima is a good one. That's a brand that each packet only has 55 milligrams of sodium. It has a really small amount, but it adds a lot of potassium and magnesium. As far as absorption goes, all of those, it depends what each electrolyte, it matters. So to answer your question, sodium chloride is pretty well absorbed,
Mhm.
but to be honest, sodium citrate's better absorbed. So, as a sports dietitian, I get into these nuances, and they're actually really important for the average consumer. Not so important unless you have GI problems, and then I might help you and say, "Hey, so the sodium chloride is a no-go for you if you have stomach issues." We need to go for a sodium citrate, right? Or if you're looking at things and you think like, "Oh, this is gonna help me get my magnesium," and Marietta said, "I need more magnesium." Well, if you're buying an electrolyte packet that has magnesium oxide, nope, it's not. You only get 7%. And so magnesium oxide's a cheap electrolyte. And so again, you're gonna see table salt and magnesium oxide added to a lot of these packets, and they're not necessarily helpful or for you. So electrolytes are absolutely necessary in athletes. Yes, we can benefit from them, but the current trend on adding them to all of our water, I'm not the biggest fan of, especially depending on which one is there. I do want to say, as far as midlife goes, one of our nutrient gaps or nutrient that occurs is we need more water. And again, we all will relate to this. If you look at your face in the mirror, you start to see those wrinkles, and it's you don't quite have the voluminous cheeks that you once had. Um, and so that partially is due to loss of water as we age. So you're born and your body's like 60% water, but as we get older, we don't hold on to that water as well, and collagen and other things. But your hydration does matter, but adding more electrolytes isn't necessarily helping you get more hydrated.
Okay.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to bring up was something I've just kind of become familiar with through someone who has a health issue. They are consulting with a dietitian and have recently found out that insurance pays for that. So I just Googled Nourish, which is the company you also work for,
Mhm.
and their tagline is that 94% of patients pay um,
You just
zero money.
You just did an advertisement for them, Julie. Yes.
I know, and I just thought, how wonderful that you could consult with someone weekly and it be very personalized.
Yeah, so
Um,
Julie, I am actually glad you said that. I've been in private practice for many years, and mostly I've done sports. But as far as working with individual clients, one of the major reasons I went to Nourish was I wanted nutrition to be available to all. It was important to me. I didn't want only the upper class wealthy that could afford to pay
mhm,
the $200 plus for an hour consult, to come and see me. And it's just not a good practice model the way that nutrition's been built and billed that way. So I do like that several companies, you mentioned Nourish, Faye, there's lots of companies out there that take insurance, and insurance is paying for it. And so getting support from professionals is more accessible. And that's helpful, because what we know with nutrition is most of us kind of know the basics. We should avoid processed foods, eat more fruits and vegetables, drink water, those types of things. It's really the behavior side. And so working with a professional is not just getting accurate information, but having someone that's right by you, that's walking through the changes with you, that's helping you on the behavior side, because change isn't easy. Otherwise
No.
we'd all do the things we're supposed to. Yeah, so
Right.
it is nice that there are companies out there making it more accessible.
Yeah, accessibility, because sadly, and I hate to say this because my husband was a doctor, but you just aren't gonna get this from your doctor, most likely.
You can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
they go to so much school as it is, and I think doctors earn every penny they get. I went to medical school after I became a dietitian and decided to come back to nutrition. And it's because I do believe in the holistic approach and
Mhm.
helping people with that. But there wasn't any room. There's so many years of education in medical
Mhm.
school. There wasn't room. You know, they get a
Yeah.
lot of flack for not doing more nutrition education in medicine. But the truth is, I look and I say, yeah, they don't have room for it. Instead, doctors just need to know they need to refer out.
Yeah.
A resource that I might recommend for women that are ages 40 to 65 would be books by Dr. Mary Claire Haver. She really addresses perimenopause and menopause. And in case you didn't clearly hear that coming through in our talk, hormone changes in midlife really do result in a lot of the compromised health that we experience and that continues into our later life. So, understanding what is occurring and how you can address that is really helpful. And so, I would recommend her books if you're looking for something to help.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've listened to the audiobook of one of hers before, and I found it to be really helpful. I know she has several, or at least a few different ones. I'm not sure exactly what one it was, but I think when you get to like those mid-40s, you start getting really curious about what am I getting into, and it's helpful to kind of have an overview of
Yeah.
what you're going through and what to expect.
Yeah.
So that's a great recommendation. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Marietta. You just touched on so many topics that were so valuable for us to hear. And I just love hearing your calm, measured approach to nutrition and what we need to be doing in midlife.
It's a
Yeah.
joy to talk with you, ladies.
Thank you so much. Just taking the fear away. There's just so much fear out there surrounding food and not knowing what to do. And so I just appreciate how level-headed and balanced you are.
Yeah.
Such a great approach. And it's doable. And I appreciate you have a can-do, encouraging attitude. And so you've definitely encouraged me in this stage
Yes.
of life. So I
Thanks
appreciate
for
it so much.
Yes.
providing some
welcome.
clarity. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. We look forward to talking with you maybe in the future when we are facing a new stage.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to
All
you
right.
Thank
later.
you, guys. Bye.
We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.